Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody who has been able to join us today. For those of you I haven't met yet, my name is Janelle Spark, and I'm the Employer Engagement Manager at Haas, housed within Berkeley Career Engagement. I'll pass it over to Karen, my colleague, who I work very closely with as well.
Thank you, Janelle. Hi, everyone. I think I probably have met some of you already, particularly those who are taking pre-core. But my name is Karen. I am the career educator for Haas undergrad students. But I house at UC Berkeley Career Engagement, the university's centralized career center. So in the next 2 years, we'll be working together. You can make appointments with me. And I host events, workshops, and other programs. So yeah, looking forward to working with you.
Yes, programs much like this one, which for those of you who don't know for any reason, today we are continuing the Career Pioneers webinar series, this time talking about careers in finance. And we're hosting Salman Zaidi, who I will let him introduce himself.
Hi everyone. Salman Zaidi. Very happy to be here. I was just telling Janelle and Karen I am currently on vacation in New York, so if you see a very strange background, that's why. That's why. Um, and I'm currently with Invesco. I'm in the ETF team, but we're really gonna have hopefully a pretty broad-ranging discussion about investment banking and asset management, both of which I have spent now almost 20 years in. So very much looking forward to it, and I very much encourage questions as we go. You don't want to hear me talk for a full straight hour. You really want to participate, hopefully.
Thanks so much, Salman. And yes, just to highlight, he did not have to be here today. He's on vacation, so just want to say a big thank you in advance to Salman. Thank you so much for your time and sharing a bit about your expertise here today.
Absolutely. Pleasure.
Awesome. So I'll move into our first slide if my slides will respond to me. We're going to go ahead and jump right into questions for you so we can start to learn about careers in finance. The first one for today is, could you walk us through your career journey from Deutsche Bank, Goldman Sachs, BlackRock, and now Invesco? And how does each of those how does each experience differentiate from each other and contribute to your advancement?
Yeah, sure. Let me start by trying to point out the big difference between the what we call the sell side in finance and the buy side in finance. I think that'll really clarify how things work. Um, and when we say finance, again, we're really talking about two subsets of finance, which is investment banking, sales and trading, which is Deutsche Bank and Goldman Sachs, and then the buy side, which is BlackRock and now Invesco. So very distinct sort of parts of the finance world, if you will. And I've never, for example, spent time in a corporate finance function, which is very distinct, but also obviously has a lot to do with quote unquote finance. So that would be, for example, budgeting and accounting and the CFO function within any given firm. That would also be called finance, but I have no experience there. I obviously have opinions if any of you want to chat more about that. But just to be clear, that's not how I've spent my career. It's mostly in investment banking and trading floors, and now, quote unquote, on the buy side, which is again BlackRock and Invesco. So with that background, and again, please feel free to ask any questions. I frankly find that most students, sometimes even at the graduate level, simply don't understand the distinction between what the sell side means and what the buy side is. So if there are any questions as we go along, a lot of it is lingo. And this isn't just finance. It's every profession in the world really has its own lingo and its own culture. So when you first start to get interested in a thing, anything, you'll hear a lot of lingo that sounds that you may not know, and in fact, almost certainly will not know. So please feel free to ask as we go along this conversation. So coming back to the conversation, my career journey. Janelle and Karen, the part that you don't see on my resume is actually that I started my career on a foreign exchange trading floor at a bank in Dubai. And the sort of going back even further around why global markets and just markets in general, and that's really the buying and selling of securities, including foreign exchange, which is currencies. Um, why that interested me to begin with, and why then I took the path that you're now asking about, which is my undergraduate was in economics and math. So from there, it felt like a natural path to go along. Um, because macroeconomics, how the big picture in an economy works, was always very fascinating to me. And really, I wanted my career to reflect that interest. And I always liked working with numbers, as I tell everyone, undergrads, and my own 16-year-old daughter who's a rising junior in high school. You don't need to be a math genius. What you do need to be is very comfortable thinking in numbers and thinking numerically. That's all it requires. So for any of you undergrads out there, I would say again, be very comfortable with numbers and with thinking quantitatively rather than, no one's going to ask you to do differential equations at the drop of a hat. So ignore that. But economics, finance, that's what I knew that I didn't know what a career in that would look like. And I started speaking to a few people, and it turns out that trading floor jobs that allowed me to speak to clients, which were corporations, and I was in foreign exchange, so my job was to come up with hedging solutions for those clients. Once I'd done that for 3 years, then it became apparent to me. This was at a bank in Dubai. I was 22 years old, 23 years old. It became apparent to me that there are limits to what I can do in that current seat, and I went to get an MBA from a pretty globally recognized school called INSEAD. I have friends who've then come on to UC Berkeley as well after INSEAD, including at the faculty actually. But the point was my career then was like I want to move from Dubai, and I want to move to either London or Singapore or New York. And the avenue for me to do that was via an MBA. And once I was in the MBA, I knew that the path that I really wanted to take was stick with quote unquote investment banking. I'll keep using the phrase investment banking interchangeably with global markets. Um, just know that what I mean really is think trading floor, think lots of screens and lots of phone and lots of yelling. That's what I mean by investment banking slash sales and trading. And so once I'd done that, once I'd gone through the door at a place like Deutsche Bank, the it's a global firm, very large firm actually, and has presence globally. And what was clear to me was this may not mean much to the you folks who are now coming through the rising juniors. The global financial crisis in 2008 is what I stepped into. So a incredibly difficult time for everybody, including people like me who are now, 27, 28 years old, starting out on a trading floor. It was the closest we've ever gotten to a depression era again since the 1930s. So it was an incredibly difficult time. And I spent 9 years at Deutsche Bank, and I saw what it meant to be recovering through the financial crisis. But the part that I suppose should be hopefully relevant and resonating with rising juniors in the undergraduate level is you hopefully start to see a path from the thing that I'm doing now, which is college, to what comes next, which is a career which you'll do for 50 years, and you're going to go to college for like 4 years. So, I guess let me summarize by saying I knew macroeconomics was important to me, and I loved the big picture. I joined Deutsche Bank via the MBA program. The recruiting at firms, including at UC Berkeley, by the way, which is an excellent university, and a lot of firms come to recruit. I would heavily encourage you to make sure you understand what that calendar looks like, and make sure you are the sort of in finance, in a nutshell, you want to be numerical to some extent. Again, you don't need to be a math genius. You do need to be numerical. And when I joined Deutsche Bank, navigating to then Goldman Sachs, which was just another competitor, the largest, actually, the most dominant investment bank really ever, I would say, was something that was a natural move for me. And then now again, Janelle, coming back to your question about how did my career journey, once you're on the sell side, Deutsche Bank and Goldman Sachs again are the sell side, which trade the securities that the quote unquote buy side wants, which are BlackRock and Invesco. These are the investors. Goldman Sachs and Deutsche Bank are not investors, they're the middlemen. They are the people who create the securities, trade the securities, and it's if we're talking about real estate, you'd call them the real estate brokers, right? They're in between, whereas BlackRock and Invesco are the owners or the managers of the buildings in real estate. Again, just putting in terms that hopefully start to resonate with some of you. So I had, after 10 years on the, or after, sorry, 15 years on the sell side, it was clear to me that I wanted to do something else. That's how I moved to BlackRock, and now at Invesco, where I lead a team in the ETF business. Look, if I'm looking at the question about how do you differentiate from each other and contribute to advancement, that's a whole different conversation, but a very long one. I'll slightly pause to say, well, two things. First, I'll talk about very, very briefly what contributes to your advancement. Again, a very long conversation. I would say in a nutshell, be very curious about the thing that you're doing. Once you get your foot through the door, no matter at what firm, at what stage, be extremely curious and be extremely open to speaking to those around you. And you should sort of have that as part of your DNA. You will never learn more than when you ask questions to the people around you. And you'll be surprised how many people want to talk about what they do and why they do it. So that contributes to whatever comes next in your career, no matter how senior or junior you are. I'm always learning, even now. In fact, it's one of the key things I pride myself on. But also, once you stop learning is when life gets really, really boring, and you never want to stop learning. So I'll stop there. I'll just pause there. That's a really lengthy road from Dubai to, Deutsche Bank and the financial crisis, and then leaving the sell side to go to BlackRock and Invesco. But I'll pause there for a bit.
Yeah, and I do want to just highlight that these are factors that will become important as you all are going through your career journeys too. And that's okay. Sometimes what you're working on or what you're thinking about is just rising to whatever moment that you're in. That's how careers go very often. So glad that you were bringing that up, Salman, and thank you for explaining how that sort of helped you move through your career to this point.
Yeah, and well, while we're on the subject, I will also say it's really easy for me here to describe 20 years in or more and make it sound like a narrative and a straight line. It's almost never a narrative in a straight line. I knew that, for example, the parts that I realized I want to do macroeconomics and I understand, I want to see how the big picture works. That's great. But from that understanding, there are dozens and dozens of paths available. This one was one that became available, but B, I was able to act on and was lucky enough to get through the door. I've got a nephew who's in the same situation right now with a degree in data analytics and economics, and he is indifferent between, say, joining a trading floor or an investment bank in finance or going to some other field entirely. So, you can easily picture a situation 20 years from now when he's having a conversation like this with rising juniors. It'll sound like a straight line. It'll sound like it was all planned. And almost always, that's a very neat narrative that does not reflect reality. And you should all know that there's no straight path almost ever, and you should welcome that and understand that, because otherwise you'll be thinking to yourself, oh, there's something wrong that I didn't do. That's why my career didn't go along this linear, well-planned path. It's almost never that easy or that straightforward.
Yeah, just to really illuminate that, something I learned in one of my previous positions is that rather than describing your career path as a path, very often it's likened to a jungle gym. And so I find that to be really more of a fun way of thinking about it too. And that's how we can think about all of our careers moving forward. So let's move to the next question, which is what hard and soft skills are most important for succeeding in a finance field?
Yeah, I've touched on this a little bit already. Let me sort of illuminate a little bit. Hard skills, again, comfort with thinking numerically. And I mean that in multiple ways. When you're on a trading floor, if I were to do a day in the life of someone who's on a trading floor, either in a client-facing role called sales. If any of you have ever watched the HBO series um, The Industry, if you're interested in the industry in general, in investment banking, sales, and trading, I would encourage you to watch that. It illuminates what a life for a young person joining a training program in one of these banks looks like. It's actually at least the work part of it, and what the physical layout looks like, the day-to-day pressure, the day in life in the day of, quite accurately done. And it's some version of, and it's a long way of answering the question. The hard skills are you able to think numerically? And the part that is often left out is under pressure. The ability to think under pressure in numbers, I would say, is probably the most important thing that differentiates you as you start your career, especially on a trading floor. And I know we're not necessarily just talking about that, but I would say the ability to handle pressure, period, and the ability to think numerically, period, will always, no matter what career that you choose, whether in finance or otherwise, by the way, will serve you extremely well. Those are things you can learn and work on, right? Those are things that can be um, there's always ways to get better at both of those things. And again, I keep saying this, you don't need to do 301 calculus to achieve that level of numeracy. That's not what I'm talking about at all. So yeah, the two things I would say, think numerically, be able to handle pressure. And if I were to even break it down into um, things like, obviously all of you on this call hopefully are very good at things like, Excel. Now, I know it sounds trivial right now, but I always give the example of you asked to do a certain calculation, and a lot of money depends on this calculation that you've just done. And you've got a few minutes to sort of give it the smell test. And it's minutes, not hours, not days, right? So it's just a good way of understanding. Yeah, it sounds trivial, but the example I always love to give is if someone uh, said, I'm going to push you off a cliff if you don't get this answer correct. Obviously, I'm making this up as half a joke, really, but the how certain are you now of the thing that you've just done, right? It sounds trivial. Of course, this calculation I've done is correct and it's in Excel and that can be incorrect. But now the stakes are much higher. How confident are you now? And I guarantee every time someone will go back and start looking at the numbers again. So that's what I mean by just, combining ability to think numerically and under pressure. Those are important things. Soft skills. And I was using Excel as an example, by the way. I'll finish that chain of thought around, again, hard skills. The ability to learn the software that makes your life and your managers and their managers' life easier, incredibly important. Like 90% of the jobs I've been in, I would say that thing has been Excel, right? It's also Bloomberg. And by the way, if any of you have, Janelle or Karen, do you guys have access to a Bloomberg terminal anywhere on the campus? Do you know what that is?
I don't believe we do.
Okay. Um, for folks who are interested in sales and trading and finance in general, I would say look up what a Bloomberg terminal is. I'm almost certain there are some easy ways of getting access. It is the tool of the trading world globally. It is almost like a badge of honor or an entry card into what it means to be on a trading floor anywhere in the world. And the ability to be able to look up things on a Bloomberg terminal would have helped any person coming through any one of these firms incredibly. So hard skills, I would say, again, Excel, Bloomberg, handle pressure. And you can call pressure a soft skill as well. Moving on, and then rounding out the hard skills thing, I would say the ability to learn even more. That software that makes your life and your manager's life easier, take it upon yourself to learn that thing extremely well. It's the way to add value. It's the way to demonstrate that you, who's just out of college, is flexible and can learn. And those are things, by the way, that people who are much further along in their career find much harder to do because they simply don't have the time or the bandwidth to do. So it's an easy way for people coming through early career folks to distinguish themselves and make themselves useful to the people who will have a say in your career going forward. A lot of that already touches on soft skills, but I'll just there's this the one thing that I always tell younger folks coming through the door are I'm sure we've all seen these memes or truisms, if you will. The ability to be on time, the ability to follow up with what you're saying. You say X and you ask to follow up on it, be sure you do follow up on it. The ability to speak to people from very different walks of life. None of these require you to be a genius, right? None of these require you to be a top order student. They don't require anything but the understanding that these are important things and therefore I should do them well. And again, none of them require anything but effort. Literally, all it takes is effort. So I would say soft skills are shockingly important, by the way. I would say over time they become even more important as you progress in your career. The soft skills become way more important than the hard skills. And the earlier you recognize that and the earlier you quote unquote work on them, the better it'll be. The whole thing about being on time, especially when you're early in your career, is really, really important. Like every manager I've ever worked with, including myself now, the first thing when you think about is this employee quote unquote doing well, one of the first things you always in the back of your mind is this person punctual, right? Am I having to wait around for them? And if the answer is no, that's already a little, blotch on your resume, and you don't want that. So soft skills, I'll say again, be on time, be respectful, and definitely have the um, willingness to speak to people from all sorts of walks of life. Like if you have that sort of skill set, you will go really far, and you will learn about way more than someone who's out there Googling all the time. Like you will learn way more from people than you do from the internet even now, and especially when you're going at a very deep level. At the broad level, sure. Keep doing what you're doing, but if you really want to understand something, speak to people. And that's what I will overemphasize for people who are early in their career.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just highlighting for the folks who are here on time, thank you so much for eschewing the Berkeley time. I know that's a very common thing at Berkeley, but it does make a difference, as someone said, to be on time in most cases. If you can, absolutely try and go for that. So for the next question, what's a recent trend in finance, like for instance, AI, working with crypto, things like that, that students should be aware of, in your opinion?
Yeah, and that's a pretty I will say it's a fairly complicated question because I could give you an opinion, and I guess what I would emphasize before even giving one is it's an opinion, right? It's not fact. If we knew, then we would all be doing the same thing, right? It's almost predictive, the question. And uh, look, both of those, by the way, AI incredibly important. And again, coming back to a point I was earlier making, which is for people who are early in their career, the ability to learn new things and be flexible around what you learn and when you learn it is going to be you're going to be able to distinguish yourself because of that. I still have people in at Invesco, for example, who have never used ChatGPT or something like it, which is shocking, of course. But the it is a trend that you should be. Um, it's a tool that you should come fairly well prepared to use, frankly, no matter what you're doing. And by the way, I use a lot of AI in, well, I should say I use the very extremely basic versions of, say, a Chat GPT or Copilot. But I would say you really need to incorporate that into whatever it is you're doing, including your career searches, which will start soon enough. So be aware of it, use it to your advantage. Um, Ensure that you are very comfortable in this potentially new world that we're entering. Crypto, I bet the people on this call, in the rising juniors are much more familiar and comfortable with crypto in a way that frankly I'm not. I'm a dinosaur. I'm a traditional finance person who's grown up on a trading floor that thinks that um, there's divided opinions, but crypto is a technology in search of a solution, not the other way around. It doesn't sound there's Bitcoin or other coins which are quote unquote useful, and of course the price of Bitcoin is all-time highs. That doesn't mean any of it is that Bitcoin itself has any inherent use. However, the technology that drives Bitcoin um, is blockchain, for example. So instead of crypto, I would say really be familiar with what blockchain is. If you're able to articulate and use that, and I'll give you an example. There's a real push in the financial markets now to use blockchain to settle trades. And what that means is instead of waiting every time you buy a stock, if anyone on this call has ever bought a stock, you'll understand that it takes 2 days to settle that stock, which means I give the money today to buy the stock, and I will actually be credited with that stock 2 days from now. Whereas if these were trading on blockchain, this would be an instantaneous transaction. And there's a big effort to bring that modernization to all markets, not just Bitcoin. So you want to be familiar with the useful parts, I would say, of the crypto revolution, and the rest, like, and don't get me wrong, and here's the other part, it almost goes back to what we were just talking about, soft skills, and the earlier parts of what we were talking about, which is uh, I don't understand crypto and the use of Bitcoin at all. But I went out and bought some because I don't need to understand it to make money from it, right? So the smartest investors I've ever met are really humble people. It's quite the opposite of what you would expect or see on TV. People who make decisions for a living, especially decisions where a lot of money is riding on those decisions, tend to be the most thoughtful and have a process of how they think about the world that makes plenty of allowance for just being wrong. No one, you should never expect, if you're the sort of person who expect that they are right 95% of the time, then you're just doing yourself a disservice. You cannot be right that often. You simply are not. So make allowance for being very, very humble, no matter what stage in your career, by the way, but especially when you're beginning. I would say have a certain humility around there are things I don't know, teach me, and always be willing to learn. So coming back to the question on hand, recent trend in finance, I would say be extremely comfortable in using AI for sure, all facets of it, and how to then incorporating it into daily workflows. If you ever get an internship uh, on a trading floor or at an investment bank of any stripe, if you can produce solutions that are automated because you know how to use tools in a way that other people don't, it makes you stand out. So definitely come extremely well prepared and well armed with what's out there in terms of AI. Um, Crypto, I already talked about that for now. The other trend I would say is um, the skills that you want to be armed with that'll serve you long term rather than trying to predict. For example, if I do this, it really sets me up extremely well. I don't know, I don't even know what to tell my children, what in terms of like what to prepare for. It used to be really 5 years ago, you used to tell every new entrant into finance, learn to code. It was like a mantra. Learn to code, learn to code, learn to code, right? And that seems like a bit of a joke now because all of a sudden you would need to have taken maybe one or two classes in some sort of coding, maybe even a certificate, and you can supplement that with AI, and that'll take you 90% of the way you need to go. Instead of spending 4 years learning to code, you've just spent 3 months and now you're prepared. So it's just another way of me saying that if anyone tells you that they know the thing that you need to do to be successful in terms of if I if I'm aware of this trend and therefore I should learn this and I will be successful, I mean the chance of that any one person being right are extremely small is the short version. So what are the things therefore that you should prepare yourselves with are coming back to what we were just talking about, the hard skills and soft skills. Can I demonstrate that I'm willing to learn and can learn quickly efficiently, and then soft skills to understand that I'm frequently going to be wrong, and am I respectful enough to course correct and ask for help all along the way. So it's a really roundabout way of not answering the question, Janelle, but that's how I see it.
Regardless, I do appreciate those answers quite a bit. Those actually resonate with me a lot too. But of course, this is not about me and my expertise, so I'm happy to move it right along to the next question. What advice do you have for standing out during finance recruiting? Are there specific classes like or certifications like CFA or tools like Excel, Python, etc. that you recommend learning? Sort of previous questions notwithstanding.
Yeah, no, I would say, look, the preamble to everything I'm about to say is as follows. If you're interested the in the industry in general, you need to start with some real basic stuff, right? So yes, Excel, Python, CFA, everything you've said is applicable. What's even, I would say, even before you get there is what are we even talking about, right? What does it mean? As I was saying, sell side, buy side, you walk through the door in an interview and someone asks you that basic question, sell side, buy side, what do you want to do and how do you want to do it and what do you think we do? And you don't have a ready answer. Again, it doesn't need to be an expert answer by any means, but just some basic understanding. And then the rest doesn't even matter. Then meaning, oh, I have my CFA and I can do Python. Yeah, but you have no idea what I actually do for a living, nor have you bothered to ask or check. So I would say the basic learning is extremely important, right? So when people demonstrate, when I see a resume that someone says, I'm interested in this thing that you do, and I would really like to know more about asset management or investment banking, and I have my first thing is always to look at how do you demonstrate this interest, right? And a resume should demonstrate that interest. So it's one thing to say verbally or even in a cover letter, I'm really interested in A, B, or C. Fine, but how did you demonstrate it? Are you part of the finance club? Are you an investor of any stripe? Do you have your own brokerage account? Even if you have $1,000 lying around that you can borrow from mom, dad, and grandparents, trade it, invest it. If you can demonstrate that level of quote unquote commitment or interest, that's a lot more powerful than, by the way, I know how to do Python and whatnot. Those are the sorts of things that get you noticed. Because the rest, Python, Excel, CFA, really time consuming, and yes, it shows a lot of commitment, but it doesn't demonstrate what you do in your free time. Like, are you doing this just to get a job, which, by the way, there's nothing wrong with at all, or are you doing it because you actually want to, right? And that's what I mean by if you really want to demonstrate an interest, do things in your free time that you wouldn't otherwise have to do that scream interest in a way that and nothing else does, right? So I would really encourage people to read, right? And I mean, um, especially here that the UC Berkeley or the Berkeley angle should resonate. The author Michael Lewis is a Berkeley-based author. He's the one who wrote Liar's Poker, by the way. And again, it's like a Bible for the investment banking slash sales and trading world. It's how it is the one book that if you work on a trading floor and have not read that book, people will look at you funny. It'll be one of those like, wait, why haven't you not read this book? It's a cultural cornerstone. So I would say read books like Elias Poker, read Too Big to Fail, another book that came out 15, 20 years ago. There's a ton of really good books about the financial crisis, which again, many of you lived through, just didn't quite necessarily understand just how big a deal that was. Like having read the history of finance and the stories and the culture really allows you to see where you could fit in, but also why it may appeal to you. So in addition to all the stuff that you, for example, even mentioned the question, Janelle, I really heavily encourage you. I find even now that I learn more from reading books rather than reading a textbook, right? So understanding why the thing is important and placing it into a cultural context and an industry context is a lot more powerful than even the hard skills like a CFA that stuff you'll learn on the job as well. Again, not discouraging anyone from doing something like the CFA. The body of knowledge is fantastic. And some firms, especially on the buy side, for specific roles, almost require it. So I would say while you're in college, actually, at least getting the first part of your CFA done, or shortly after you're done with college, is a really good idea because it's a huge time commitment. It's probably as much time in terms of hours studied as an undergraduate degree in itself. Probably a bit less. I know I'm exaggerating, but not by much. So in other words, while you're still fresh and studying and are actually studying most of the material that would be applicable to CFA anyway, it's probably a good idea to get that level one done as soon as you can, or at least in the very early years of your career. But having said all that, again, there's so much reading material that you can arm yourself with that is a really fun way of learning about the industry and why you may enjoy. I just gave my daughter, the who's just turning 16, Liar's Poker. Again, Michael Lewis lives in Berkeley, world famous author, and not just for this. He's written all sorts of stuff, including The Big Short. That's the other book that you should definitely read. Again, those two books I would heavily encourage anyone who's interested in anything that I've said so far should read those two books. It'll give you a great understanding of where we're going. Um, yeah, so recommended learning, yes, all the stuff that's even listed here, but also read is the short way of putting it.
Wonderful. I really love this endpoint that you've reached and highly, highly recommend that as well. I believe that concludes all of the questions that we had and takes us to the end of our session for today. Before moving into open questions, I just wanted to quickly highlight that for those of you on this webinar, we'll be having folks from LinkedIn, Apple, and Intuit joining us in our next webinar. So if you are able to, we would love to have you join us once again. But otherwise, let me see if I can get back to this. We can move into open questions. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And I will give the floor to the students. So if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand, to put it into the group chat, whatever is easiest, most comfortable for you.
And before we do that, the other thing I would say is, look, this can be an incredibly fun career, right? Like as young people who are looking to, who are exploring, what do I do next? What career should I go into? It can be incredibly rewarding time on working with people around you, and I would say if you enjoy working with people, you enjoy a fast-paced, and you enjoy understanding the big picture, sales and trading and asset management are very rewarding careers, and eventually it can be a very financially rewarding career as well. So there's that. So because we're in Berkeley and in the Bay Area, I understand that the world looks like Google, Microsoft, and tech is where we are. That's what we live and breathe because of, and in addition to the fact that you go to UC Berkeley, the number of recruiters that are likely going to be from those firms and from those industries are much higher than they will be for anything else. I know, by the way, BlackRock recruits at the Masters of Financial Engineering program, so there is some connection between the titans in finance and Berkeley. But what I'm trying to say is the world you live in here at UC Berkeley is not necessarily the best representation of how good a career in finance can be. So read, and I'd be certainly happy to answer questions either now or an email or whatever the case is, because young people simply don't understand what's out there. And if you are a product of your environment, it's much easier to get into tech living where you are. But I would highly encourage you to consider finance and especially sales trading or asset management as a career. It's a lot of fun.
Before answering the next question, Salman, I wanted to ask you, is it all right with you if I share your Invesco email in the group chat? Or do you
Yeah,
have a
absolutely.
preferred email?
Actually, can we make it? Yeah, actually, Invesco is perfect. It's a good email to be on.
Okay, wonderful. Mariah, you had your hand up first, it looks like. Oh, or maybe not.
Oh yeah, sorry, I was putting it down, but First off, I do just want to say thank you for taking the time to come. And
Of course.
right now, I'm kind of deciding between like focusing on asset management or corporate finance.
Mhm.
I know you mentioned that you didn't have like any experience in corporate finance, but I was just curious to like why that is and like if you just weren't interested in it or what really drew you more towards that side versus corporate.
Um, it's it's funny a lot of these things get it's kind of what you're exposed to first. I genuinely believe that. I'm sure you might get different responses to that question. Uh, if I think about it dispassionately as a quote unquote, like, should I do this or should I do that? You'd have to weigh the pros and cons. Now the pros for say asset management or even sales and trading are that frankly you're just going to make a lot more money a lot faster to begin with. And then eventually your career in corporate finance will likely catch up over time because there is a certain ceiling to where you're going to get within, say, sales and trading, especially sales and trading. Um, but then it comes down to things like how much optionality do you accrue, which means can I do many more things after I've done this thing in, say, sales and trading? And I would say that's where the pros of sales and trading actually it's more of a con than a pro, which is, for example, in my own career when I was in on a sales seat, which means I was the person that was doing large trades with some of the invest some of the large global investors would call a bank like Goldman Sachs or Deutsche Bank to trade with. That's called a sales role, and it's a very specific thing. Just what I'm trying to say is the career options after a sales role in on the sell side aren't exactly they're not extensive, truthfully, right? So it can be a limiting factor from that perspective. People just do it for the rest of their careers and tend to retire early, by the way, because the by your mid 50s in terms of age, you're probably one of the oldest people on trading floor already. Certainly not the case in corporate finance. So long way of saying, and I don't know if it's Marie or Mariah, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. Um, it's a long way of saying that there are pros and cons to each. Part of it, in my case, was that I was exposed to a trading floor much more than I was the latter. But I also know that in terms of my own personality and how I like to view the world, I'm really glad that I ended up on a trading floor because it allowed me to be very mobile globally. It allowed me to see, quote unquote, how the world works beyond my one company. And it allowed me to get a theory of macroeconomics that I would not have had working in the finance department of one company, say, or in corporate finance specifically. So yeah, I hope that's attempting to answer your question in a way that is somewhat analytical, but also comes back to what I was initially saying. A lot of this is just luck too, right? What were you exposed to before? That had nothing to do with that. I just had a brother who was doing something similar, and so I knew about it earlier than I did the rest of the stuff. So so yeah. Anyway, that's we can move on to the next if anyone has questions.
Yeah, it looks like Leslie Gomez, you had your hand up next.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Salman. I'm Leslie. Nice to meet you.
Hi,
I
Leslie.
also, hello. I also wanted to say thank you for being here. I did want to include that you bring like a refreshing perspective to the table, and it's very much appreciated because it sounds very honest. And so I just want to say that first. But I do have
You're
two
welcome.
questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, okay. My first one was like, what do you think made you personally stand out to have worked in the companies you've had and you're at? And then my second one was your biggest challenge entering the corporate world?
Yeah. Let me start with the standing out part. I think I've touched on most of it, but I'll coalesce it into one answer, which is um, do the easy things extremely consistently, right? So this is the classic case of being in the door before your bosses. I know that sounds so archaic, especially for younger folks coming through the system, but that stuff really matters. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be before your boss every day. That's hopefully your boss is not that petty when you make have a boss. but they can be, right? And that's just reality. Like that's how things can be for people. So why give someone who is signing your paycheck a reason to quote unquote not like you or have some negative opinions about you? Just be on time, and be respectful. So the stuff about what made me stand out was I was actually always very curious, and I have the ability to be able to strike up conversations with many different people on a trading floor or even at a firm that that have nothing to do with the function that I'm doing. And you start to realize that that actually is a skill in itself that many people don't have. And when you start bringing a different perspective to a conversation with your peers, and they haven't turned around to ask the question that you have on your mind to the person who can answer it, because, that person, I don't know that person, therefore I can't speak to them. But if you can, that's a skill and it's a differentiating factor. So I would say that's the one thing that I actually differentiated myself on. I was, by the way, competing with math PhDs for the same jobs. And they wouldn't be able to do that simply because, yeah, they can, make a spreadsheet, cook breakfast, but they can't actually get up and speak to someone in a way that it draws them out and gets you the answer that you need. And most of your adult life, Leslie, is going to be getting other people to work with you in the thing that you're trying to do, no matter what you're doing. Even if you're a coder and you're have an extremely specialized thing that you do, trust me, if you think that the thing you do is very specialized and has no, I don't quote unquote need to speak to other people, you do, you just don't realize it. So I would say that's the thing that made me stand out, and I've always someone who's been able to make relationships with other people. So that's the answer to that question. Your second question, sorry, remind me. I'd made a mental note of it to remind me the question again. I had already answer, and now I've forgotten the question.
Yeah, of course. No, you're so good. It was, what was your biggest challenge entering the corporate world?
Yeah, and I see this very much, and I know people who are rising juniors, rising seniors, and people who have graduated, and there is definitely this feeling that getting a job nowadays isn't as easy as it was 5, 7, 10 years ago, and there's probably some truth to that. I would say a the just understand that even if that's quote unquote partially true, if there were 100 jobs before and there are 95 now or 90 now, there's still 90 jobs, right? So you shouldn't change what you're doing because there's a narrative out there that there's fewer jobs. Again, that may be true, but that doesn't change what you need to do. You just have slightly fewer jobs to compete for. Having said that, my own challenge was very similar challenges that other people in graduating seniors and graduate and rising seniors are having, which was that first break is really hard to get, can be, especially at a large reputable company and all that stuff. Which the better paid and more reputable the company is and the higher profile it is, the more competition there will be for those roles, guaranteed, right? But the thing, my first job on a trading floor was a pure and simple lucky break, right? Uh, but the job I got before, and I say lucky break because I had a friend who introduced me to his boss, and of course, you need to be prepared for those conversations, but it had nothing to do with me being really smart. Sure, I'm smart, but so is a lot of other people. So, comes back to my point about differentiating yourself. Are you the sort of person that people want to help? That really matters, by the way. That really, really matters. So, taking a step back from quote unquote my first break, my first job at an investment bank was an analyst making financial models for an airline, I remember. Um, and that was where I felt like the things that I did really well came back to got in on time, worked 65 hours a week because I had to, by the way. But that break was not easy, even at this investment bank as making Excel models at the airline that I'm referring to. Even that was not easy to get, right? So if I had to distill this down in terms of advice, would be start early, have resumes that are looked at by your career services so that you're not have a polished resume up front and really utilize the resources that you have at UC Berkeley and get multiple people to practice interviews with. That stuff really matters. You're only going to get so many shots at getting an interview. So try and give it your best shot every time you get one. that first job almost always is the hardest to get, in my opinion. For some people, it's not, by the way. For some people, either know people or it happened, whatever. And there, then my answer would shift slightly and say, no matter what job you get, no matter how menial you think it is or how amazing you think it is, the basics need to be done the same way, which is be extremely curious, work extremely hard. Sounds pithy, sounds almost like a cliche, but I guarantee it's true. It'll get you way further, and it'll set you up for the next break and the break after that, to do that. So prepare, have polished resumes. You know that it's likely going to be a hard grind to get that first break. But that whole saying about the harder I work, the luckier I get is probably true on the margin. So that's what I would hope that you take away from this conversation.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to jump in really quickly just to say that we are at 12:55. We do have two more questions in the queue. So for those of you who do have to drop right at the hour, we understand. If those of you would like to continue on to hear the rest of the questions, then you are welcome and we will keep the room open. And it looked like Nikhil, your hand was up next.
Yep, thank you. I just want to say thank you for giving this talk. It was really insightful. So I'll make it kind of quick because we only have a couple of minutes, but I know many of the IB trading finance internships have already closed for summer 2026. So as someone who just got interested in this field, do you think it's too late to enter the industry? And if not, what are some areas that I could look into to get a foot in the door? And also just to preface, I'm a rising junior. Yeah.
Yeah, so you've got 2 more summers. Well, you've got 1 more summer in, and then you go back for your senior year. I would say a lot of investment banks will be coming. So the peak recruiting season is actually around the corner. So it's that October through it's actually September, October, November, pre-Thanksgiving, or peak recruiting season for investment banks, almost all investment banks, especially the largest ones. And then the smaller ones, and their recruiting cycle tends to go a little later, which means December, Jan, even Feb can be a realistic option. So I wouldn't say that you're too late for any of those things because they're recruiting for summer of 2026, which is when you would be a rising senior, which is exactly the timeline is right. The other thing I would say would be if, for example, and again, all of these internships are very hard to get. Don't get me wrong. None of these are, you shouldn't expect that you're going to be, the chances, just sheer numbers are just low, right? The other thing I would say would be plan B and plan C should be some version of there are smaller banks. Get in touch with people, really just reading websites and getting names and emailing them your resume and displaying interest and hopefully you can do one of those things. I know I did this, which was send my resume with a short cover letter and a short introduction personalized to that person. Like if I didn't know you, Nikhil, I saw your profile on LinkedIn or Bloomberg or the web, and what you did seems interesting. I'm looking for an internship. Here's my resume. I would love to chat. Something of that nature. So it doesn't have to be UC Berkeley. It doesn't have to be through some formal recruiting program. The world's your oyster. Make sure that you get in front of enough humans, whether it's in the Bay Area or otherwise. And that's other banks, but also their registered investment advisors, RIAs, of which there are thousands actually, and some very large ones where you can learn quite a bit. So I would say keep your all of everything I just said requires an understanding of what you even want, right? Or even what's out there. We've already talked about investment banks, but there's RIAs, there's asset managers. Everything I just said applies to every one of those people as well. Reach out to people, demonstrate interest, demonstrate a willingness to get through the door, and you'll be surprised how many people are potentially responding. You'd think the answer is, 1%, the answer might be as high as 5%. So just be persistent and go for it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, one more question from Oliver.
Hi, Salman. Thank you for
Hi.
the presentation. I really
Of course.
liked it. My question is regarding recruiting. So I'm interested in asset management and equity research,
Yeah.
but I wanted to know if you know of any resource book available to prep for the technical questions or the technical interview.
Yeah. And Janelle and Karen, do you guys have access to stuff like, say, Vault guides? I think it used to be a staple not very long ago. I don't know if that's still a thing, but excellent resources for exactly what Oliver is asking for. There's asset management, there's guides to asset management, there's guides to investment banking, there's guides to sales and trading, there's guides to quantitative finance interviews. Like this is all stuff that is readily available at almost every large university you can think of, many small universities. And if they don't, this is stuff you can buy off of Amazon. So the number of resources, there's Wall Street Prep as well. Literally, it's called Wall Street Prep. Look it up on Google. The resources available to prep yourself for quantitative finance interviews are now endless, frankly. Wasn't the case back in the day, but now, like, you're spoiled for choice, if anything else. So, but the Vault Guide, the whole, and Wall Street Prep, they do a really excellent job of day in the life of, so you understand what the job actually looks like, but also then, and therefore to get in, I need to prep for these 10 questions or these 20 questions. So you will not be disappointed by a lack of resources.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, we are at time. There was one more question that snuck in. So Salman, it is up to you unless you
Of
have to
course,
run.
yeah,
You
absolutely.
do have one more. I believe it was Giorgio who had it.
Yeah. Thank you, Salman. Nice to meet you.
Likewise.
So I had a quick question. So because the world of finance and careers in finance is so big and so diverse, I'm currently interested in both finance careers and entrepreneurship in a way.
hmm
And I was wondering whether, because I'm a little lost because there's so many career paths, if you
Yes, there
know a
are.
place in the industry that kind of mixes the two finance and entrepreneurship in a way.
Yeah, no, so look, actually, now that I think about it, Janelle, your question about, trends in finance, the universe of fintechs has exploded over the last decade, right? So these are, and they're trying to, apologies if you can hear sirens, that lets you know that I'm in New York City. The the world of fintechs, especially in the Bay Area and New York City, is the ecosystem is really, really large. Um, And that would be a good sort of uh, intersection of what you were just asking about, Giorgio, entrepreneurship versus just plain finance. So there's all sorts of would-be disruptors in fintech that are trying to do this one specific thing, whether it's on a trading floor, an insurance company, an asset manager, or private equity, you name it. They're trying to do this one specific thing in a way that's better, cheaper, that doesn't involve legacy IT systems, legacy architecture, legacy costs of the other larger established players, the incumbents. So there are plenty of resources that can guide you to, largest fintechs or most innovative fintechs out there, including in the Bay Area and New York City. And those would be an excellent place to start looking. Uh, a lot of times, frankly, it's basic things like I know this sounds like a luxury and it probably is, but there are people out there who will be like, you know what, I will work for you, fintech A, B, or C for free, just because I want to understand what this is like for the next 2, 3 weeks. A lot of times people will say yes. And trust me, I know that's a luxury. Not everyone could do that. I couldn't do that when I was that age because I had bills to pay. But if things like that are ever an option, I would encourage you to reach out to people and demonstrate, again, interest, everything I was just talking about. And with fintech especially, the problem is that they can be extremely early stage, they can be extremely small, and they may not have resources to pay you. What they lack in pay, they'll say we'll make up for we'll actually teach you a whole bunch of stuff, etc., etc. That can frequently turn into a job as well. So it's about, are you able to do that? I know it's a luxury, and if you can, great, you're lucky. And B, I would encourage you to look. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I would think about it.
Yeah, it does. Thanks a lot. That's very interesting. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay. I'm going to cut all questions from there. Thank you so much to everybody who brought them and to those who have stayed on this call. Your participation means everything. And if you haven't had a chance to already, please, Karen has dropped this in the chat, but we do have a feedback form. So if you could tell us kind of how these have been going for you, if there are things that you would like to learn about in the future, that is very helpful for us in answering to what you're interested in. So please be sure to provide your feedback there. Salman, thank you so much for your time today. Your insights have been so impactful and incredible to each of our students who joined us today. And we do hope that you'll join us again in the future. Thank you to everybody for joining us again.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Good
Thank
luck.
you.